In a series centered around characterization and combat, it's crucial to understand how an individual's fighting style intelligently conveys not only the character's strengths, but also motivations, flares, and passion. In this series, I'll be breaking down a character's core talents and appreciate their strong tactics and choreography throughout the fight scenes. What are they good at? What tools do they use? What makes them unique from others? And most importantly, what tricks do they have up their sleeves? So welcome to How Strong is Alan Becker's Stick Figures, where I break down a character's fighting style, skills, tactics, and combat movesets and mentalities, and analyze how these things improve their personal characterization. Last time I did a video on blue, which, whoa, and today we're talking about green. All 20 pages of this guy. Help me. The spotlight-stealing, dual-wielding maestro who will kill you while still looking good. Well, as good as you can look as a stickman, but I digress. Disclaimer, this isn't your average power scaling style of video where I'm taking in strength in isolation, and I also won't be putting numbers for the sake of proving superiority amongst characters. It's a dissection, where I'm using the scenes and the context of their personality to better understand why they fight a certain way. Also, it's not completely power that I'm after either. It's appreciating what that character can do and what aspect of their story is best reflected in their combat arsenal. So, let's begin. Green from Alan Becker's Stick Figure series is characterized as the socially adept, highly competent, competitive, and completionist combatant, while still having a heart of gold and sentimentality. Green is a theatrical one of the sticks, always wanting to show his best side to the audience through his talents for music, entertaining, and general people skills. But of course, the universe humbles him every now and then by genuinely pulling multiple pranks on him just to take him down a few notches, which is what makes him very endearing. But the question is, how strong is he? Now, because each of the sticks have a unique approach to their combat and have a different purpose narratively, it's crucial for me to say that the formats aren't always going to be one-to-one. Green gets the most individual fight scenes in the current series and is usually a solo performer in particular segments that just want to flex him. Even in larger group shots, he gets his individual moment to shine most of the time, giving me a lot of material to work with but also to scrutinize. And with that, let's start with combat physicality. Green's fighting style, on the surface, is best described as having the strongest emphasis on both dexterity and charisma. His fighting style isn't just about him winning, it's also about him putting his best foot forward. His stances are more defined, his movements are snappy and rhythmic as opposed to the ones that have more brawl-like elements, and even his antics in between have a dose of rhythmic theatricism. But in terms of actual combat prowess, Green shines the most as the group's most agile fighter. Green's fights usually showcase the four phases of dexterity: speed, where he genuinely just moves or runs faster than his adversaries; evasion, when he dodges out of the way of enemies, projectiles, or obstacles that he can see; elevation, where he uses acrobatic or aerial abilities to get better vantage points that are otherwise underutilized by other sticks; and interweaving, which is whenever he chains particular movements with his body to make the transition time between attacks feel seamless. Let's start with speed. When it comes to general speed, all of the sticks are objectively fast, but Green's speed is something that's constantly highlighted in his characterization. Compared to everyone else, with the exception of Blue's insane ability to turn a regular bow into a Gatling gun at some point I've stopped asking, Green has the fastest movement that enable his other forms of dexterity. Green overwhelms an enemy by moving faster than they can hit and hitting faster than they can move. Being the fastest in things is also highlighted in his personality. In Speedrun, he was crowned as the fastest to complete his challenge. In Cave Spider, his arachnophobia kicks in and he outsprints everyone else. And in the parkour, during the first challenge before they all start fighting each other, Green is the fastest to complete it. We also see that Green's adrenaline doubles his speed, especially when he's tense, as we see him panic against the piglin. Green's speed is also what makes his fighting style the most graceful and rhythmic out of all of the sticks. He's able to get a lot more done on the battlefield just by executing his attacks faster. But speed is only the surface of his dexterity as we move on to the other three. Evasion is where Green's fight scenes shine the most because unlike the other characters that focus on a more front-heavy, kill-if-kill style of animation, Green has a mix of dodges where he's impressive because he feels untouchably nimble. This is best seen during the prank episode where he overwhelms Red, who tries to brute force his way to caking him. The problem is that Green's speed and evasiveness make it impossible for Red to actually land a blow. However, it's important to note that Green's evasion is not the same as blind reflexes. In combat, there are different kinds of reactions that a person has. They're dependent on a lot of factors, but for Green, I noticed that two are important for him to evade a target: vision and tension. Vision is, can you see what you're moving out of the way of? Green is great at reacting at enemies that he can see and have direct awareness of. Conversely, he's inconsistent in evading targets that surprise him when his guard is down, or if he's attacked at an angle he doesn't anticipate, or people he doesn't anticipate: red, yellow, blue, orange. Green's speed becomes his only crutch when trying to move out of the way during moments like this, but most of the time, Green doesn't dodge what he doesn't notice. The opposite of this limitation is actually the skulk sensor staff that Orange has in the Lucky Block staff episode. Even if Orange isn't paying attention or looking at the adversary, the staff makes it so that his hands or body are being dragged along with it to counterattack or dodge. The cakes on the side only trigger once, so with Green's agility, he's able to instinctively dodge them, but Red and the cakes falling from the sky are the intermittent patterns, which forces him to pay attention to Red the most. The only time he removes Red from his vision while Red's on the offense is when he turns around to kick Red in the face. This is also the case during the time Green got mauled by a goat. Green was dodging extremely well until he took his eyes off of it and got ran over. He also gets shot down by lightning in Lucky Block staff, is bombed to Kingdom Come by Blue in Ultimate Minecart, and is killed by Orange. He also doesn't see Yellow when Yellow banzai kicks him during AVA 9. That doesn't discredit his achievements, of course. Thinking like that is far too black and white. But it gives a cool layer to Green's combat character. It also reestablishes the authenticity and stakes of his internal fighting style. While he's fast and nimble, he's not completely impervious. This is the case during their intro sequence against Primal. He doesn't know his opponent and where his opponent is and is relying on his reaction time to save him from getting stabbed. Which leads to the next point. Vision-based evasion is also accompanied by tension. Tension includes adrenaline and other emotions that could heighten your sense of urgency in combat. Going back to Primal, it's when Primal misses the first time that Green's adrenaline spikes and he's forced to now pay close attention to the fact someone's trying to stab him. And even in a lighter way, this includes just a general idea that someone is out to get you, like a cake. In calmer situations, Green's evasion is more so toned down depending on the context. Whenever he's sparring, he prefers taking direct hits at his friends instead of dodging to preserve the name of the game being a friendly combat. Because where's the fun in not hurting each other? Going back to the prank episode, because I think this showcases this very well, Green's not in any immediate hostile danger in all honesty, but his nonchalance and speed in thwarting Red comes from the fact that not only is he anticipating Red, he's in a more relaxed environment that lets him focus on a single task: evade Red. Conversely, Green can get very paranoid when in high-intensive combat, which greatly increases his ability to dodge out of fear or self-preservation. He doesn't even try to pose for a metaphorical camera because at this point, his goal is survival. But his evasive maneuvers are also dependent on who he's with, because when he's with allies, Green's priority isn't always to evade, but also to protect. If not getting hit means that someone else will, he'd rather throw himself in front of that person rather than dodging. Next up is elevation, which I think is Green's more unique aspect compared to the other sticks. Green is the master of controlling the elevation he's fighting in and adapts the best when it comes to maneuvering around difficult terrain. He's the strongest of the sticks to weaponize heights, climbing, and shoving the most given his versatility with the fishing rod. Green is always depicted trying to find higher ground if he can during fights. Examples of this are when he's climbing on top of the building in Build Battle to fight the Wither, him swinging across the Nether to try and evade the Piglin, and also him trying to climb over the turret in PvP. Green has also used slime blocks in the Ultimate Minecart to jump over all of them during the final sequence, before getting sent to next week by Blue. Green also uses the high ground when evading the Piglin during parkour. He's also climbed up the walls of the fortress to get better vantage points on Purple to keep him from escaping. Whenever he's in team fights, Green's basic combos with allies include him being boosted to higher places. Green executes a combo with Blue during the end where he's tossed straight up into the Ender Dragon. And in the Influencer arc, he lets himself get boosted by Orange to grab onto the glitch Green. In Bed Wars, he asks an Iron Golem to throw him to the other side, he grabs the guy and throws him off of the ledge, He evades one of them by climbing up the ladder, and he makes a clutch save with an Ender Pearl. He also enjoys the Portal Staff with the Spiderweb Staff for maximum aerial mobility, as opposed to just flying like the rest of the sticks. This shows a level of expertise that relies more on dexterous skill as opposed to straight magic. He also uses the shield plus bomb tactic to try and impress Purple, much to his detriment. Green also enjoys teleportation. He utilizes the Ender Pearls on PvP to get a jump on Orange, and he also uses them when he was cornered by Yellow and Red during Bed Wars. And again, the Portal Staff. Green's prowess in fighting with elevation makes it so that no enemy is ever too high or too far from him. Keeping Green trapped or forcing him to fight in the same elevation is a great way of forcing him in a narrow playing field. Interestingly enough though, Green's also seen fumbling his balance at times when he's distracted. An example of this is in parkour, when Green fails to jump because Orange kicked the boat from under him, or Yellow bumping into him to try and move past him. This is also the case in Wipeout, where Green's already on the block and Orange jumps to the same block behind him, causing him to almost lose his balance had the ladder not grabbed onto him. Now the last phase of dexterity that Green shows in his attacks is when he combines technical skill with speed. Certain characters specialize in different levels of dexterity and strength-based fighting. Of course, all of the sticks have a pretty high baseline in their combat skills, with characters like Orange being great at picking them up naturally, and the others having more than average fighting capabilities due to their nature of being fighting sticks. However, not all fighting styles are the same. Orange, for example, is a straight strength-based fighter, where he relies on upper body strength most of the time to deliver slower but more powerful hits. Blue is an example of strength priority, dexterity complemented. He moves fast, but usually attacks with upper body punches and throws. Red is the perfect balance of both, capable of switching from a brawl-based fist-fighting style, then shift to an exclusively lower body sequence. Yellow is a dexterity priority fighter, who primarily prefers kicks and faster movement over strength of the swings, which is why he's much more proficient with leg-based maneuvers. The reason that I showed all of this is because Green is what I'd classify as being in the middle of Blue and Yellow. Green's speed doesn't heavily rely on his upper body strength, but he does rely on a lot of upper body swings, meaning he hits a lot of smaller hits while using his speed to exacerbate micro-movement. Simply put, interweaving is what I define as putting a micro-action in between a bigger action so that your overall movement is highly efficient. This is what makes Green's movements feel so seamless, because they transition so neatly into each other. Green can transition an action like jumping in the air or landing on your feet into an equally offensive action like kicking someone in the back or throwing their sword while they land. Green is also a momentum-based fighter. Green noticeably doesn't stop his movement even when he's landing or he's in the air. His fight with Primal showcases this the best when Green is matched with an enemy that is significantly larger and front-heavy. That's what really makes Green's agility deadly. If you try to force your way to him, he'll throw that force back. Strangely enough, this is best exemplified with him dodging Red's kicks. Because Red only focuses on exerting as much force as possible against Green, Green can correctly counter that speed with his own. And even worse, when Red does land a hit, Green masterfully returns that momentum back towards Red and weaponizes Red's own strength against him. This transfer of momentum makes it so that if you ever fight Green, you're at a disadvantage if you're actually faster and stronger, but less reactive. Going back to his fight with Primal, Green uses Primal's fast but heavy fighting style to his advantage. He uses the forces of the grab first to build up the momentum needed to backflip off of Primal's grip. Then he uses Primal's reckless lunge to trip him and discombobulate him before launching him off of God knows how high of a building. So, putting that all together, we have the fundamentals of Green's fighting style. He maintains momentum by constantly being in motion, he interweaves attacks between dodges and vice versa, and he adjusts his stances based on his weapon. Which brings me to the next part of his combat physicality, and the style that separates him the most out of everyone else. This is because Green's strongest specialty is being the weapons master of the group, capable of adapting to most of the fighting styles needed to wield different melee weapons. While each of the other sticks are equally proficient, Green masters the potential of these weapons the most, having the ability to swap between them without any delay. This proficiency in adjusting his fighting style also makes it so that he can weaponize his body the best compared to the other sticks, like when he maximized the sugarcane's potential in The Witch to still be a formidable 1v1er. Green is also exceptionally skilled at unequipping weapons and requipping them, while smoothly retrieving them without sacrificing combo upkeep. Let's start with his first fighting style, one-handed lasso-based or string-based weaponry. The fishing rod is primarily used in two ways: to move Green to and from difficult terrain, or to hook around enemies like a lasso and drag them down. In Ultimate Minecart, this is the primary way he kept Orange down. Green uses a lot of circular movements with his fishing rod to build momentum, or he'd drag himself from one location to another to dodge. Green also uses the rod's line to cover larger distances, especially in weaponizing elevation. It's hard to predict which angle Green would come from. He has also used chain-based weapons in the series like chain gauntlets or the spiderweb staff. When in teamfights though, the rod's line is also used to displace allies and put them in safer locations or closer to enemies for more opportune positions. Green also uses line-based weapons offensively to chain hurled projectiles at an enemy, like when he was chaining with Red in Lucky Block's staff. One of his strangely prevalent maneuvers with the weapons is how often he wraps it around the creature's neck. For allies, he usually just grabs onto their back, but when it comes to enemies, he chokes the hook or the actual line around their neck and pulls them backwards. This is something he does for Orange on Ultimate Minecart, and we see Orange pull back on the rope. Actually, Green's fighting style with it is an amalgamation of everyone else's way of using it. The next weapon that I want to break down is any elongated weapon that covers more area than an average sword. This is the weapon that gets the least recognition but the one that alters his fighting style the most. It allows Green to do rapid piercing strikes at the enemy with a larger reach, but it sacrifices his overall mobility because he only plays within the confines of the weapon's length. However, it's also the fighting style that covers the most space around him. To fully appreciate his mastery of this weapon type, let's break down his fight against the Allen Cursor. Green starts off with a dive with the spear into the cursor. From the single motion alone of him jumping, he's already managed to swing the weapon twice. When Green lands, he uses the glaive's length to spin the weapon from its center axis. He uses the weapon's force built up from spinning to cleave it down towards the mouse. He continues that crescent trajectory to spin the glaive again to rebuild the lost momentum. Green uses the force to start his movement. He jumps back to brace himself, then runs towards the cursor with that continuous momentum. Then, with the momentum built up and his stance done with enough thrust, he jumps into the air and throws the weapon at the cursor. Allen dodges though, but we see that Green doesn't stop moving the same way Red and Blue were once they were countered. Instead, he keeps going and actually uses Allen spinning the glaive to his advantage. He times the catch in a way that the head is still towards the cursor and nearer to the ground, which lets him counter-spin and launch himself in the air using the tip of the blade. Because he and the weapon have been in continuous motion, his momentum has been constantly preserved throughout the whole thing. So he uses the rest of the movement to spin himself on the glaive's axis to position himself closer. It's also nice to note that Green's next movements are slower than his first ones after his entire sequence was finally interrupted by the other sticks. Realistically, as much as we can imply on this kind of show, it's because Green already lost the momentum and has to build it back up if he wants to do that same chain of attacks. The next weapon that he utilizes a lot is the sword. Green's one-handed swordplay is based on fast swings, and he almost always prefers fighting with only one hand on the hilt when dueling. Green's one-handed strikes are also designed to chain into themselves. His stances also change depending on how he's hitting. When he's hitting faster, his body is much closer together, but when he wants to exert more force, he takes a wider stance. Though, there are times that he goes for the two-handed grip. This is when he's blocking or when he has to deliver stronger attacks that require much more force. Then we move on to Green's more prevalent style. Green's dual-wielding prowess comes from how much he turns his body. Much like his logic with the elongated weapons, Green tries to cover as much space around him as possible whenever he's dual-wielding. And the two weapons are usually meant to interweave with each other. If he blocks with one, he strikes with another. His dual-wielding combos come in two ways: sword and sword, and a fishing rod with another melee weapon. The difference with how he duels with sword and sword is that his general axis is with himself, meaning that it's his body, not the weapons, that are spinning in and of itself. He also moves around less when using the two weapons, as if he's anticipating that combat is meant to strike the enemy down mano-a-mano. Because his fighting style is defined by speed, he uses the two swords to lessen the downtime between the time he blocks and the time he strikes, making him able to chain attacks without exhausting either hand and to execute successive attacks. This is why in the parkour, he was also paired with a pig that was equally fast and also dual wields. The other character that actually does this style of swordplay is Orange, who has used his body before as a spinning top to kill multiple enemies at once or to parry multiple shots at once. Green's second form of dual wielding is with the fishing rod and sword combo. Green's fighting style when like this covers so much more space but with less prolonged contact, because the point isn't just to exchange blows, it's also to immobilize. This style also allows him to rod multiple enemies together with the string of the rod to keep them clustered for his strikes. And because a fishing rod can cover more distance than a sword, this enables Green to latch onto farther enemies faster and lessen his travel time. His combination of single target immobilization coupled with unparalleled chain attacks can discombobulate and overwhelm any inexperienced fighter, and that's what makes him very deadly. But since we're talking about characterization, I think it's also important to think about his combat mentality. Combat mentality is what I define as how the character thinks during the different phases of combat, and this is usually where the crux of their character's storytelling is. What are their personal inhibitors or activators in their personality that change their fighting style? Again, I'm not just interested in gauging the power or strength of the character, but also the context of why they do what they do. Initiative, which is how they start the combat, engagement, which is how they think in combat, and escalation is how they resolve a combat, either by ending it with their fists or by talking. Green's initiative mentality is what I genuinely think is the best during serious situations. During moments of stress or panic, he's very quick to react and start the initiative to gather the others or defend someone else. Green is the first responder who almost always follows the other person in the lead to make sure they're safe. This is exemplified in the way that he usually runs or engages after Red, like in The King and in AVA 10, and how he ran after Purple in the Note Block universe. Green is extremely attentive to the emotions of his other allies in combat and rarely actually instigates stake-worthy fights. Emphasis on stakes. When in situations that have actual danger, Green's demeanor is much more restrained and calculating. In parkour, he shifts immediately to a proactive initiative when he remembers that Purple still has Red's pig. He also makes sure that Yellow's okay first before they can relax. In the Dolphin Kingdom, he takes the initiative to go ahead the team to look for Orange, and in cases like the chef and the box, he only engages when Red does. Green isn't a hostile character, and actually, if he's given an option to go for peace, he usually will take it. Even when he's getting bullied, he trusts his friend's judgment to delay any altercation as much as possible. His patience for Bob was massive just because he was Orange's creation. However, his initiative mentality also changes depending on two things: how much danger the situation actually poses to him and his friends, and if there are any emotional stakes that are involved. Because when he's sparring with his friends, or when there's an ego on the line, that's a different story. First is that Green is a showman-style fighter, motivated by the want to win, impress, and be the star of the show. He's not opposed to taking down his friends for fun if it means winning a competition for as long as he deems that the environment is controlled. Green, in these situations, is almost always the first one to pull out a weapon on them and escalate the combat to a much higher level. He's also not opposed to initiating combat with his friends if he thinks that it's for the glory of a competition. But that's honestly just all of them. It's a form of respect to each other's combat capabilities and the trust in their friendship that this is all just consented violence. Also, he's pretty chill about getting murdered twice in PvP and just makes sure to return the favor to everyone else. However, Green shifts gears almost immediately when he realizes that the situation has gone a bit too far or has lost that joviality. In the lightsaber battle, when Red and Blue panic and get their lightsabers stuck, Green goes into older brother has to fix this mess mode to turn off his lightsaber and move to turn off theirs as well, but not before they all explode. Furthermore, in the parkour, when the atmosphere immediately changes and he feels that something's wrong, Green gets suspicious and starts asking questions instead of gloating. On a more humorous side though, Green's not opposed to resorting to violence when his hard work is being tainted or diminished by an opposing party. He tried being gentle with the color gang during build block battle after they interrupted him and inevitably lost his cool. He also got mad at the silverfish who was just trying to enjoy the concert. And he still failed to keep his cool even after the other sticks realized that maybe fighting the army of silverfishes isn't the smart idea. But he doesn't like starting genuine conflict. This change is evident in the influencer arc when he immediately tries apologizing when he realizes that his friends are actually mad at him. Conversely, when the emotional stakes are much higher, like how Purple betrayed him, Green is genuinely pissed off and doesn't hesitate to beat him down for it. Green's engagement mentality is rather straightforward too. In fights where danger is genuinely present, Green prioritizes the well-being of his allies first and foremost before himself. Compared to the other sticks though, he is the most put together during combat. He doesn't get as shaken to an extent of blind rage, and his stamina is also significantly consistent. Green also doesn't hesitate to incapacitate, harm, or throw someone off of a building when he feels like his allies are in danger. But it's in the de-escalation mentality that I think Green differs from the others. Emotionality is one of Green's bigger character highlights. For Green, an enemy backing down is a sign of peace as it is. He doesn't immediately fight Purple until he showed signs of running away, and when they do meet again in the Note Block universe, he doesn't resolve to violence even if he could. And by this point, Yellow already gave up on Purple. In the Influencer arc, though a bit more introspective, Green does look inwardly to find the solution to the glitch YouTube videos, which not only pacify his enemy, but also gives him something to think about. Green's multifaceted nature, despite being portrayed as egotistical and a perfectionist, are what makes his characterization all the more compelling. When he's at his wit's end, his priority is to save others. Okay, so similar to what we did with Blue, it's time to finally break down Green in action. This one is for a fight where I think all of his weapon masteries are best showcased, specifically in his recent one in AVM 37. The fight starts with Green using a netherite sword to parry the little guy's wooden sword. And you can see that this is just a fun little game to him the way that he wields it. Compared to his other fights where he usually uses a normal grip, here he twirls the hilt of the blade by the axis of his wrist, and swinging the sword down onto stand 1, which knocks it back. Green doesn't finish completing that downward strike though before coming back up to slash the sword again through the stand's front, and then hoist himself up by the leg to kick himself up from the armor stand to launch himself into another one. He uses that as a platform to roll in the air to initiate a twirl kick for the one in the back. His passive leg lands on the stand first, which disorients the stand's lunge and gives Green a clear path to complete his kick with the active leg. As before he even lands, he's already chucking the netherite sword into the back of the stand as he's equipping his axe. He completes the sequence by arcing his back to stabilize himself while simultaneously driving that axe into the enemy behind him as his hand was naturally coming down to balance himself. Can I appreciate how this attack goes? Green's main line of action, when you're just going to put it in a sentence, is he launches himself off and he lands on the other side. But in that line alone, he's shoved one enemy, kicked another one, threw a sword, equipped an axe, and then drilled that axe into someone's head, all while never losing that initial pattern of movement. Green's next sequence is removing the axe from the stand's face by using his foot to pull the stand in with him as he rolls on the ground. This sends the stand flying to the opposite side while Green pushes himself up. But before he completely stands up, he does an underhand throw of the axe into the newly respawned stand, which knocks it back. Green continues the roll while cleanly grabbing the wooden sword from the ground, then he finishes it off by slicing through another enemy before cleanly transitioning the motion of standing up from the roll. He sends a kick into the stand and turns that jump into a spin by hurling the sword at the enemy behind him. We can see him rapidly switching to a fishing rod with his other free hand, which he uses to hook onto the stand's neck. Instead of landing, he continues the path by reeling himself into the stand and sliding underneath it to trip it with its feet. He uses his path to grab onto the netherite sword, and then without any lag whatsoever, he instantly pulls himself again to the same stand to kick it right in the stomach. Green uses that kick to push himself on top of the stand and roll forward with it, using the rod to grab it by its neck to go along with him in the rotation. Green kicks the stand off and somersaults back onto the ground. But in the same arc that the fishing rod takes, the moment it unhooks from the first stand's neck, Green aims it in a way that he can swing it again at the newcomer. He uses the travel time to reposition himself and use the active leg to do a back kick into his target. But he still uses the momentum from that sequence to cover more distance and stab into the one in the back. Green's not yet done though, as he presses forward, throwing the armor stand off of him and somersault over this armor stand and launch himself into the one in the back. He doesn't linger though, as when the stand he's on top of starts tilting, he balances himself and jumps again, slicing through it with the hook of the fishing rod. If you notice, the fishing rod was cast in a way that connects to the stand that Green backflipped off of. So when Green goes for the retreat, he wastes no time in disconnecting himself from it as the fishing rod reels him back to the next target. We get a cut here with Green standing planted on the ground and a stand charging at him. He dodges by rolling to the front as the stand tries to swing high, which lets Green balance himself by staying low. He sprints to that stand and swings high, and while he's still in the air, he equips his trident. His stance adjusts accordingly when using the weapon as opposed to when he was just using the fishing rod. When he had the rod, he needed to be able to move back and forth quickly, which is why he usually only landed with one foot. When he had the sword, he kept his position relatively small and tight. But when he has the trident, his stance is firmly planted on the ground. He has no need to conserve momentum, so his legs are wide, which lets him maximize the reach of the weapon. It's also important to note that Green's attacks with the trident are much more strength-focused as opposed to his previous attack, which relied on him being too nimble to get locked down. Green wastes no time from recovering from that swing to throw the trident into the stand in the back before hot-swapping back to the sword and then equipping an axe as his offhand. You can see that he immediately retreats his legs in a way that closes his stance when he's dual-wielding. He cuts the stand clean through its head that if this hadn't been a stick figure animation, I'm sure would be rated 18 for gore, ramming his sword through the stand's back and killing it. Green is an efficient killer and doesn't let the sword linger for too long before pulling it out, which is enough time for the other stand to take the weapon and throw it towards him. Green anticipates this and unequips both the sword and the axe, giving him the free hand to grab the trident. Rather than fighting against the trident's trajectory though, he redirects it instead backwards into the charging stand before stabbing it in the chest. All in all, Green is definitely my favorite stick to watch when it comes to general aesthetics. And his choreography is always so fluid that it's such a treat to watch. Anyway, that's it for this episode of How Strong Are Alan Becker's Stick Figures. I'm Mushi, and if you like this kind of content, feel free to subscribe. See you next time!